Eddie Hearn recently called out Jake Paul, telling him that he will never be a champion or anywhere near close to a championship caliber when they were both promoters for their fighters, Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano. They had several verbal altercations that were pretty funny, amusing, and I would say, even truthful and shed light on some things. Eddie brought up some criticisms that a lot of people have towards Jake, calling Jake out on a lot of his, things that he says and statements and, even lies to some degree. So we're going to be breaking that down today.
Eddie, your reaction to Jake saying he will become a world champion?
Everyone's entitled to have a dream. No, seriously, I'm being serious. I think there's absolutely no way he can beat a world champion and become world champion. But I will say he's improving a lot. He's dedicated to the sport. I don't know how good he is because he hasn't really faced a real fighter yet. It's not his fault. He signed to fight Tommy Fury.
All right, now Eddie comes out the gate swinging with a very, very valid point that a lot of people have been criticizing Jake about, which is that he hasn't really faced a real boxer. He hasn't faced someone who has, been tried and battle-tested in the boxing game. And this is a very true statement. There's nothing false about this. Jake really has not faced anyone. He's done a very smart job picking these MMA fighters that have, been on a terrible losing streak or have been knocked out 4 times in a row, or have just had really sad endings to their careers and are no longer really at a level where they can compete, have a downward momentum in their career, and he brings them into a boxing ring and, ends up being able to beat them because boxing in an actual boxing ring is very different than in an MMA cage. People don't realize that when you have wrestling takedowns, clinches, wrestling clinches, Muay Thai tie-ups, things like that. It really changes the game, and it makes the striking significantly different. So this is a very, very valid point, and he hits the nail on the head. Jake is definitely not going to like this. Let's see how this goes.
A 5-time world champion, and Tyron Woodley's a real fighter.
Mate, he's not a real boxer. He's not, Jake.
Well, I
Jake,
mean, the first skill in MMA is boxing. He
won
the UFC championship with a right hand.
He's a great UFC
fighter. Do you consider Tommy Fury a real boxer?
Yes, but I'm not in terms of ability. But listen. But
so what defines a real boxer?
A real boxer is someone that is his
journeyman,
craft.
like Andy Bishop.
So we have Jake here making the argument that because Tyron Woodley was a UFC champion and knocked out Robbie Lawler with a right hand, that makes him credible to be a worthy opponent in the boxing ring. And this is the little trick that... See, Jake is very smart, and he picked Tyron because he knows Tyron is not a good boxer. Tyron is not a good boxer even in MMA. When you have takedowns and leg kicks and clinches and stuff like that, it opens up positions in places where your hands can land. But even then, though, Tyron Woodley never really beat someone in the new generation that was high level. He was a champion before Colby Covington came up, before Kamaru Usman came up, before the newer guys of the division, Vicente Luque, and plenty guys like that have come up, Leon Edwards, that honestly would probably smoke Tyron Woodley and have smoked Tyron Woodley, like Kamaru Usman, Vicente Luque, and Colby Covington. See, Tyron was a champion before that and was knocking out guys that weren't necessarily bad, but just guys that wouldn't be able to hang in the top 10 or top 15 of this era. All right, and also Tyron suffered a 4-loss losing streak before being cut, even taking a lot of damage, and was really put on a downward spiral in his career before he fought Jake. So again, Tyron was really not a good boxer in the UFC, right? And he's definitely not a good boxer when it comes to the actual boxing ring. But the average fan doesn't know that, so Jake Paul can do this funny, clever, convenient little trick where he can go, oh, he was a 5-time UFC champion. He was a UFC champion. And while that's true, that doesn't mean he's good in the boxing ring. And he was also on a 4-fight losing streak and never really beat anyone that high level, at least anyone that could hang in this day and age's generation. So it's an interesting little trick that Jake can kind of play on you, but Eddie is not falling for it, as we see.
Who's Andy Bishop?
Exactly, but he's a real boxer, right?
Yeah, but
because anyone can go and get a professional boxing
but what I'm saying
license.
is Usman does not qualify to give you any right to talk about you fighting for a world title, and nor does Tommy Fury actually. But I give you the props, I give you the respect. You're improving all the time, but the proof will be in the pudding. I don't believe. By the way, I've said that I think Jake Paul is better than some fighters, but I don't believe you will ever get close to being a world-class fighter.
I believe that I would beat anybody on your roster that's under 10 fights. Anyone.
We can do that.
Any one of your fighters that has under 10 fights, easy.
Okay.
A cruiserweight?
A cruiserweight?
Any weight. Literally any weight.
Okay. So
any weight.
Any weight.
Any
Anyone
weight.
under 10.
Any
no.
weight.
Perfect.
I will beat anybody on your roster.
I've got about 400 of them.
Now, Eddie Hearn here gets Kamaru Usman and Tyron Woodley confused. He is referring to Tyron, not Kamaru, saying that beating Tyron does not give him credibility that he would be able to beat a world champion. And neither does Tommy Fury, but Tommy Fury is a more credible boxer than Tyron Woodley, and that does make a lot of sense. Now, it's interesting to see, how easily Jake's ego and insecurities are triggered. And one of the reasons for that is because he knows he hasn't really fought, anyone who's credible in the boxing world. He knows that. And that's why he has these very easily, destroyed arguments that he tries to bring up about, Tarn's a UFC champion. Anyone who actually understands the difference, understands understands the difference between, boxing and MMA fighting, and how different boxing is in MMA fighting. Anyone who understands that knows that, it doesn't really make Jake credible. Jake could have fought a guy, an amateur who's been boxing for 3 or 4 years, and it probably would have been a much harder fight than Tyron Woodley. Let's be real. It is what it is. But, he has these arguments that just get torn down very easily, and he gets defensive when they get torn down. And, it's just kind of funny to see that. And Jake knows deep down in his heart, until he fights someone that's, actually, going to make him credible, he doesn't really have too much to stand on. We see here his ego is getting a little bit triggered, saying, I will take, any of your fighters that, 10 pro fights. That's actually a very risky thing to do, because he could be fighting someone who's a much, much better than him, who would probably tune him up pretty good in there. And again, this is a result of ego. This is actually a very risky thing for him to do, that Eddie Hearn might call him out on and make him look bad on in the future if he denies it. He's saying right now he can beat any of his fighters that have less than 10 pro fights. That's not going to be a good move for Jake, saying at any weight, which means he could be fighting a heavyweight. So it's not very smart for Jake, and it's kind of funny to see how easily his ego is just kind of triggered, and that is based on insecurity and him making false claims and feeling the need to prove himself in this world. So we'll see how it goes and see if he can do that. So that is going to be all for this video. Please let me know what you guys thought in the comments below, other types of content you'd like to see, and tell me, do you think Jake Paul will one day be able to beat a world champion or not? Let me know in the comments below. This is The Art of Violence, and until next time.